everybody. I did a seminar in June on Tai Chi sword as an internal practice for Nei Gong for one purpose only, which is to cultivate the internal power as a tangible, palpable third element. That is, there's mind, body, and then there's this third element of this etheric energy that you can feel and treat as a real thing, as though you had a pet guard dog or something that you were training. The dog is real and this energy is real, okay? So I very briefly during the seminar, I just brought in this Filipine Bullwhip, the latigo, and I showed how I very briefly made a sort of a metaphor or an analogy saying that you could learn to propagate your relaxation and you could verify that with this kind of instrument. And we're always looking. The hard thing about relaxation is that when it's conscious tension, like if I tell you to clench your fist and then relax it, you can do that, right? It's fully under your control, like the game Simon Says. But there's also unconscious tension that's much harder to drop. And that's like Simon Says when you miss the cue. The guy says, touch your chin, and you touch it and then you realize it wasn't Simon Says. So it means there's a gap between your mind and your body. Your body's not responding to your true intent. So what we want is an objective measure of our internal tension. It's very hard to find. You don't really want to hook yourself up to an encephalograph or whatever kind of lab instrument. I mean, that's not natural. That's not in the right spirit of our kinds of martial arts, right? You want something that's natural, that's kind of free and fun and dynamic, but that has the effect of pretty objectively calibrating your internal tension. And this is that thing, okay? So when you have too much internal tension, you're not going to be able to get the right result when you try the whip techniques. Now, the whip techniques are not hard to learn or to do in and of themselves. Anyone can learn in a couple of minutes, the basic thing. It's either a loop where you continue the whip, you whip continuously, or it's a loop with a sudden cutback, a sudden change of trajectory. That's really all there is. It doesn't matter if it's a horizontal, vertical plane, front, back, sideways, whatever. It's all the same thing. But what's really interesting is, and the interesting thing is, like, as you go along, you're going to find three kinds of results. And each time you try a slightly more difficult trick, this scale will play itself out again. So the first result is just a whiz. These are all sounds, okay? You're just going to hear a whiz because you're too tense. You may be forcefully throwing the whip out and you think, oh, I'm strong, I got muscles and everything, but why aren't I getting that crack? It's because you're too tense. And tension slows you down, just like in boxing. Tension slows you down. So that's the first, that's what I call result one, which I call a whiz. Okay, you'll just hear that. Result two is a pop, so a very soft thud, like pop, pop, pop. Now you're on the right track. Once you hear that little bit of a pop, it's like one kernel of popcorn going boop in the microwave before the whole bag starts to blow up. That's pretty much exactly how it sounds, just boop. And that is still subsonic. Barely subsonic. It's getting close to that 600 miles per hour, Mach 1, but it's not over the line yet. And then when you do it right, with everything firing on all cylinders and you're extended, you're relaxed, everything good, then you're going to get the hypersonic crack, which I call level 3. And that is Mach 1 or above. It could be the end of this guy, could be going up to 1,000 miles an hour. And that's when you get a good solid bam, like boom, and you'll definitely know it when it happens. And then you'll know you were relaxed, and you can just keep repeating it. And you can try it in different variations to see how your body position and even your mental attitude, things like that, how do they affect your level of relaxation? It's a superb scientific feedback tool. Just like in machine learning, we always talk about it, we require a so-called objective function, which is to say, just a measure that as you go through the many, many cycles of machine learning and training, are you getting closer to the goal? Like, you know, recognize a picture of a cat as opposed to a dog. Are you doing better or are you drifting away? This is the tool for that. Low tech, but ingenious. There's a few issues you have to think about, a few practical issues. First of all, the whip itself doesn't matter. You can get any whip from 4 feet to 12 feet just try them all. It's no big deal. If some of them seem too easy for you, just try a heavier one. You can try up to the Indonesian Bullwhip, which is like super heavy, more than 12 feet long. But whatever, don't geek out on equipment. That's one thing. The other thing is safety. So you do want to wear, that's why I'm wearing these dark safety glasses wrap around, because you do want eye protection. I mean, why take a chance with your eyes, right? Otherwise, it's totally safe, totally fun, and you're going to have a great time with it. But I want to emphasize that the relaxation that you can learn to develop and calibrate and verify through this method, that's not the same thing as the internal power, okay? Don't get me wrong. Because there are so many athletic trainings nowadays that talk about the wave, like a sort of an entrainment or engagement of your muscles that culminates in some final action or some final extension. That is like the whip training in the sense that it's purely physical. That wave of energy is not what I talk about when I use the word wave in all my books and videos. Maybe I should have come up with a better word, or maybe they should be using a better word like entrainment, muscular entrainment, or something like that. Anyway, it's not the same thing. But relaxation is not a goal in itself, but it is the precondition for developing this kind of energy. And for that, nothing better than a good old Filipine latigo. These tricks and this art were taught to me by Master Sifu Ran Lu, who's a master of Chinese, Tibetan, and Philippine arts. And if you were using this for martial arts, it would be different. For martial arts, you'd have the long whip in one hand, like maybe your right hand, to keep a distance, and then you'd have the cuchillo or some kind of knife or a sword in your other hand, and you could keep them away with the whip, and then if they rush in, if they rush the whip or they grab the whip, then they're coming right into your knife. But we're not going to get into the martial arts stuff. I'm just going to openly and honestly tell you, I purely view this as a feedback mechanism, like a laboratory calibration equipment. Another interesting thing to consider as far as the whole relaxation game, what we're working on with this tool, is asymmetry, or actually the goal being symmetry, okay? But you may encounter asymmetry. It's just like in yoga. There's a lot of moves in yoga that have a right side version and a left side version, depending like which leg you bend first. One leg will be straight and the other will be bent, things like that. Even Padmasana is actually asymmetrical, because you can start with your right on top or you can start with your left on top. So in the same way, all of these techniques, assuming you're working with a single whip, you can actually work with two, but that's beyond the scope of this course. But if you're working with a single whip, you know, you'll have your driving hand will be doing the moves, and you'll find sometimes that you can do it on one side, do it meaning, as I described before, the number 3 on the scale, getting that hypersonic crack. But the other side, you just get a whiz or a pop. Remember the 1, 2, 3 scale of quality that I talked about. So why is that? How come it works on one side and not on the other? Well, that's really interesting, right? So investigate yourself as you practice. Investigate, why is it different? Are you unconsciously holding it, the whip at a different angle? Are you doing it slower or faster? Or, that's kind of the premise of this whole discussion, are you unconsciously tense, more in one hand than the other? It might be that your right shoulder is super strong because of work or something else, or just habit over time. Maybe you're right-handed, and that can cramp you up so that you get a whiz or a pop on your right, but you get a good crack on your left. So it's a great way to harmonize and equalize your level of relaxation across your body. So keep that in mind as you practice.